Hello and welcome to a third episode of a Hot Bowl of Tea. I'm joined again by Lucy.
Hello. Thank you for having me again. I'm glad you wanted to have me back. Didn't do that terribly last time.
But yeah, we're having a bit of a debatey sort of thing today, and we're going to be talking about discussing, should people get fired for what they post on social media? I did some research into this this social media sort of what platforms and what's on there. And from December 2019, there was 3.7 billion people that are active on a form of social media, which is quite a few people.
That is just a ridiculous number. That is crazy.
It's almost quite shameful because I mean, personally, I have loads of platforms and social media, but that I think everyone has. Well, it depends your demographics and where you live in the world and your geography and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some parts of the world where, particularly in sort of southern and eastern Asia, where it's more common. In some areas, you might have a mobile phone, but you don't have a working toilet in your household. So social media reaches so far, and it's just ridiculous. I was doing a bit of reading into this, that it's so big. There's so much stuff on social media. You can't see all of it. There's no way that your employer is going to be able to dig up so much stuff, or say an employer employs 10,000 people, they're never going to be able to go through every single one. I don't know, maybe they've got the time and the money. So it is just so big. It blows my mind how big and how much stuff there is on social media now.
There's a lot of platforms as well, because the most recent one is probably TikTok.
Yeah, that's true.
Huge.
I didn't even think about that.
I don't understand how people get TikTok obsessed, because I downloaded it the other week, and it's just rubbish. It's like
I haven't quite got to that point. Let me know what did you think of it, because I've been resisting downloading it for weeks, and sometimes I get a little bit tempted, and then I just think no, I'm not going to do it. I can't.
I have it, but I'm not on it 24/7. I might look at it on my lunch break, but I'm not obsessed with it. I just look at the comments because it's so funny. Just looking at the comments, watching people argue about Jeremy Corbyn, and then you've got Boris Johnson, two very different people just arguing. It's great. I do go on Instagram and have a good nose at some controversial things in comments, just to see what people think. That's always a good pastime.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you said to see what people think, because I was having a discussion with my parents the other day, interestingly enough, how when people, I think that social media isn't necessarily the voice of the people, and you're absolutely right that you can go online and go on different posts to see what some people think, but not what all people think. And I think that's a theme that will link in quite well to our discussion, which is that there are obviously loads of people who comment stuff on social media. You can gang up with other people on social media. You can all band together to put out a certain message, but at the same time, it's not everyone. You can't say that what you see on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or whatever about a certain issue, that's not what the entire population or what the entire world thinks. So yeah, it's really interesting that how social media, it is the people, but it's also not, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's very selective. It depends on what you follow, what you look at, and what you're interested in. Because for me, I follow a lot of National Geographic. I follow a lot of conservation, but then compared to you probably follow a lot of political things and
I follow a lot of history accounts and
I follow history accounts.
Yeah, historic royal palaces and stuff like that. There are so many different communities out there, and I think you can really tailor social media to have your own experience, that you can see only the things that you want to see. Especially on Twitter, I think you can now put in specific words that you will never show up in your timeline. So if you didn't want to hear or read anything about Brexit on Twitter, you could put in the key word of Brexit, and Twitter would automatically filter out anything that had that word in it from your timeline, which is a really good idea because you can really tailor it now to only see the things that you want to see. But then at the same time, we can't kid ourselves that because we are only showing ourselves to an extent the things that we want to see, we shouldn't kid ourselves that the things that we're seeing are the opinions of everyone or they reflect everything that's out there, because we are just tailoring it to view a very small section of the content that's out there based on what we like.
And I think it's we live in a very, this is another debate we could have about we live in a very social media and media saturated society, and in some you could argue it is actually running society. Everything we do is based, like, we get all our ideas, we get everything from a sort of social media sort of thing. And
yeah, I
if you see
agree with
advertising, I can't stand it. I hate packaging and I hate advertising. Like, you can get fired. You can get fired from your for what you post on social media. You can face disciplinary and dismissal for sharing private company information, and also negative comments about a job, client, or employees.
Now, this is really interesting because I think I was also doing a bit of research on this, and I found myself mainly on American websites. I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but there are certain, in the US at least, there are certain issues that are kind of protected. So if you discuss them and you complain about them on social media, and those include things like your wages, your working conditions, those issues are protected and you can talk about them on social media, and chances are, at least in some American states, you can't get fired if you discuss that, because you are protecting your and standing up for your own rights as a worker, and saying, and that can be very useful, I think, because if you work in terrible conditions and you go on social media and say, my working conditions are very poor, this needs to change, then surely that's a positive thing that you're spreading awareness of that.
No, if this is I think this is a UK thing that I looked at, but
yeah,
but I think there are negative comments, but then they're also highlighting things which but if they improve those, it will also make the job look more desirable and let the company look better.
Yeah,
even though it's one of those things, but I feel like a lot of people won't do that. Don't think like they would put like stuff about their working conditions on like Facebook as such.
Definitely. That's the thing, that I think the rules and regulations and the opportunity to do something like stick up for the fact that you have bad working conditions, that's something that is available potentially for you to do. But like you said, I don't feel that it's used for that purpose very often, and
it's more to slag off the company. I think that's what it's more about, rather than like the improvement of it.
And a lot of the research that I did came back to the same idea that what you post on social media almost doesn't matter whether you're talking about the company or whether you're just spouting offensive rubbish. If everything links back to the image of the company. So if you are somehow tarnishing its reputation by something that you've said, then in theory that should be enough to merit disciplinary action and being fired. And I think I agree with that, because I feel, I mean, clearly there is no place in the world for saying something incredibly offensive, and there certainly isn't on social media as well. I think companies have the right to uphold their reputation and try and do what they can to stay afloat and keep their customers thinking good things about them. If they've got an employee that's saying really unfair negative things, or they're being incredibly offensive, then that does have the potential to bring the company down.
I agree with you, but I would say it's more as it's not professional, and you should leave your work. I have the very thing that you should leave your work life and you should have your private life. I have a thing like you don't mix them.
Yeah, that's just me. I agree, and I think social media has blurred those lines though. I think that's part of what makes this issue something that can be debated about, because in the past you had your social life and your private life and then your work life for something completely separate, and the only way you could kind of merge them is maybe if you talked about your work life with your other co-workers or maybe with your friends and family. But again, that's something that is quite private, and those kind of conversations are something that are just kept entirely private. So 50 years ago, or even realistically 10 or 20 years ago, you could complain about your pay, or you could say that, oh, my boss is such a mean person. You could say that behind closed doors in a pub with your mates or your co-workers. But now those conversations that were private have been transferred into the public sphere, and anyone can read them. And that's why social media has changed the game so much, I think.
Yeah.
That's how it's made difficult that there's so much blurring now, that people are having those same conversations that they were having in pubs and at home and things like that, but they're transferring them online. And then even if you think that your Twitter account or your TikTok account or whatever, even if it's got 2 or 3 followers, you never know when something is going to snowball and spiral out of control. And that's the danger, I think, with social media. And that's why even if
Yeah.
even
I
if
mean,
you
I know.
morally think that what you've said doesn't warrant you being fired, I feel like everyone these days just has a responsibility to think more about what they post online. Because I know we have
Yeah.
freedom of speech and everything, but at the same time, social media, it's out there. We can't get rid of it, and we have to be aware of the fact that anything that we say can very quickly spiral out of control.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you. I know if you go into a reasonably paying job or a reasonably good job, they will look at your social media and go, wait a minute. And that is almost like an
Mm,
investigation they do to just see what type
absolutely.
of person you're.
Mm,
Just to even see if you go out every night and get
mhm.
absolutely drunk and
When I got my first job, even though it was just a part-time job in retail as a Christmas temp, I can remember my parents sitting me down and going, make sure that everything you have on social media, not just now, but in the future, is something that you would be proud to, or you would be happy with sharing with your employer.
yeah, I have on social media isn't dangerous, and always make sure your things are on private.
Hmm.
But you can get fired under the Equality Act of 2010. You know that for the dismissal of social misuse would have to meet the Test of Fairness in Employment Rights Act 1996. But it's all about the company keeping their reputation, and I completely respect that.
Hmm.
But you know when you said about even though you can't separate your work and your private life much anymore through to email. So
And we're going to have to do this increasingly now because so many people are working at home at the moment. And as a result of
I
this, I think even after the pandemic dies down, more and more people are going to be working home permanently. So you would have that there's going to be even more opportunities for public and private life to merge, because you might have to do a lot of your job at home where you could have your work email open in one tab and then your Facebook or your Twitter open in another tab. So that there's going to be I think this issue isn't going to go away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it ever will. And there are a few examples of people who necessarily put like meaningless things and just sort of jokey things that have actually gotten fired. There was a. Did you want to start with the normal people or the posh people, like the
Let's carry on talking about normal people, and then I think we'll go
normal
into,
people?
yeah, going into talking about
The
celebrities, because that's a whole different ballpark.
I think it's more important for celebrities, but um, but I know there was a university student and she posted a post on. She obviously posted a post on Facebook, but she posted a comment on Facebook saying "conquering the world one fat lady at a time." I mean, that is she got fired for this because obviously it does breach the negative comments about clients as
Hmm.
such. But she did take him to I think she did take him to a tribunal and say that I was actually I was unfairly dismissed,
Hmm.
and she did get a job back, but she declined it.
Hmm. Is I
So
think what you've touched upon there with that particular example is the idea of jokes. And I think that's a really important distinction to make in the debate, which is that on the one hand, you've got people who are genuinely homophobic or racist or transphobic or whatever. And then on the other hand, you've got people that maybe are channeling those kind of messages, but will defend themselves and saying that it was a joke. And this is where we get onto the greater debate of, does this kind of offensive humor even have a place in society anymore? Did it ever really have a place in society? Because that comment that you just read out, from the way it's written, I feel like it was worded intended to be a joke. That doesn't make it right, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she's an incredibly horrible person, if that makes sense. It's difficult to sort of articulate.
Quite jokey.
Mhm.
But
what do you think about
I mean, I don't know why
it's that was linked to, because so the comment was sort of linked to her job, right? So that was kind of tarnishing the reputation of the company. So did she get fired from her job, or sort of fired from...
Yeah, she got fired from her job. She got fired from her job at the company.
Okay, right.
And then she said, I was fairly dismissal. But then if you don't use the company's name, how can you sure that is what it's about?
So much out there on social media that even if she doesn't say what the company is that she works at, say she put that on Facebook, and then even if she only has like 10 Facebook friends, one of those Facebook friends might know which company she works at and then repost it and say, look at what this person has said about this company. So I think on social media, things can spiral a lot quicker than they ever could before, because even if you put out something that you think is only going to a few people, you don't know who can then share that on. And if you're not entirely confident about who your audience is, then that, I think that's another thing, is because there are, when people make kind of risque, controversial, offensive jokes, if you pick your audience correctly and you say those jokes to people that know you and know that you don't mean any offense by it, especially if it's a joke that is not being deliberately derogatory to another group of people, maybe it's about, I don't know, someone that is about yourself or about someone else in that group, then if you pick your audience correctly, then then possibly you can kind of get away with it, because you know how the joke is going to go down, because you might just say it to your friends and family. But on social media, I think it's impossible to pick your audience, because even if you think, I'm only posting it to my 10 Twitter followers, everyone suddenly now...
It's where they share it.
Exactly.
Because once you once you post something, it's gone. But then for another example, like this person is still a member of the public, but they're in like a higher position, should we say. A University of York, their professor wrote a anti-Semitic post on Facebook, which obviously
I think that's
I think that's a sackable offence.
Definitely, especially that, considering his job is to impart wisdom onto others. It doesn't matter even if he was, I don't know, a physics professor or something that had nothing to do with history or religion or anything like that. The fact that his career is to impart wisdom onto other people and share his views and teach others means that his views about the wider world could have a potentially negative impact on the learning of other people, and could very easily be shared. So I think that, and so that's kind of interesting how does it depend based on what job you do? Because say you have a cleaner or a refuge collector or a firefighter who puts an anti-Semitic post on Facebook. That post is still completely wrong, but they're not going to transfer those views onto anyone through, or to many people through their job. So is it still a sackable offence then? I would say
Yeah.
probably yes, but
I think it depends on what you're saying as well, particularly what's happened with anti-Semitism in the past,
yeah.
and and sort of religion, the what's happened in the past and what's actually happening now. I think that was it's almost how insensitive it is compared to maybe the uni student that was.
It's such a fine line that you just need to take everything on a case by case basis with because there are so many different scenarios that could be considered here, like posts as well that happened 4 or 5 years ago. What do you think about sacking someone based on something that they put on social media years ago before they even got the job that they have?
Yeah. I mean, it depends what position they were in at that time. If they were still a in a very good job or a very good high position at that time, I wouldn't necessarily. I should think that they need to be more professional and careful if they knew that their career was going that way. But then it's just like, well, if you were just working, if you were 16 and posted something about some sort of racial derogatory thing on Instagram, and then later on in 30, 40 years time it comes and bites you, is that fair?
Yeah, because I a couple of years ago, I think it was a YouTuber. I feel like it was Jack Maynard got pulled from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, because he went on the show and he was going really well, and then it came out that I think he was about 22 at the time, and it came out that when he was 14, which is so young, he had posted some racist stuff on Twitter. And on the one hand, I think that by pulling the plug on someone for something that they've done years and years ago is suggesting that we as a society think that people can't change, and that what they believe at 14, 15, and any kind of crude, silly jokes and offensive jokes that they make are how they're going to behave for the rest of their lives, even though they make them at 14, which I think is a too pessimistic view of the world, because people do grow up. The person that anyone was at 14 is not the person that they are today. On the other hand, I think that if you know that you're going to be in a public eye, it's kind of moving towards celebrities now. That guy knew that he was going to be on a primetime TV show. He knew that he was going to be quite a famous person. So I think he almost has a responsibility to go back and kind of check that there is nothing to be unearthed about him, especially as he wasn't the first person to have tweets dug up about him. It's just a precaution that you need to take now, I guess.
Obviously, we're going up in like the status, I suppose. This is another example. They should have been sacked straight away. I completely agree with what happened here. But Justine Sarko, the Information's PR executive at IAC, this is back in 2013 though. She tweeted, I'm not going to repeat the tweet because it's quite offensive. She wrote she was going to Africa, and she wrote a tweet, and then while she was on her flight, by the time she got there, she had an email from her boss with her letter saying you're sacked, because it was what it said. It was quite racist. In fact, it was very racist what she said, and I just think that's but then she never had a fair. Could you say that she never had? Because she was sacked straight away. Could you say, well, she was never it was never professionally done if she was sent a letter?
And it's interesting because on the one hand, I see where you're coming from, that you could say she should be given a chance to defend herself or explain her actions, but something as plainly and badly racist as that tweet was, because I've heard about it as well.
Do you know what tweet it says?
That it's almost, it has no excuse. Even if you had said, have you give me some explanation, then that's not that it just that there is no explanation for it. That she couldn't use herself in
Yeah,
that way, and especially when she was out there on a trip, she's representing that company, and by
yeah,
sending her a letter telling her that she's been sacked, then not only does it preserve the reputation of the company, but it fights racism in general. I think at the heart of this is the fact that
yeah,
the reason why people want to sack, or members of the public want to sack people who put offensive things on Twitter, is that they want to fight the issues that those comments are about. That because by sacking her, you're helping the global fight of racism in a way, even though it's a very, very small
yeah.
thing. Every small thing like that shows that saying things like that isn't okay.
You have to be super careful,
Hmm.
just simply because you're representing a brand,
Hmm.
and anything you say will look negatively. Because as soon as the press gets
Hmm.
hold of it,
Yeah, because they can now.
you're
They have
gone.
the power to. But I'd be really interested to know what she's doing now, and what she went on to do next, because surely, though she
Yeah,
got fired for, and she's known for this very racist tweet, there's no way that she's just going to be unemployed for life now. And that's another thing that I read about when I was doing research, is that on the one hand, a lot of people do, celebrities in particular, get quote unquote cancelled because they have said something offensive and put something offensive online. But that doesn't necessarily last for a very long time. And I found this really interesting, and it never really occurred to me before that a lot of the celebrities, like Kanye West and Kevin Hart, and the comedian whose name escapes me now, even Amy Schumer, that loads of different celebrities that have been cancelled because of things that they've said, they've come back in 6 months, 10 months, a year's time, and their careers have just kind of picked up again. So even though at the
yeah,
time some people they decry cancelling and say you've just ruined this person's life because of social media mob mentality, actually when you look at it with hindsight, cancel culture serves to shame people for their actions at the time, but it rarely ever has actual long-term career ruining repercussions. And the only time where that has happened is when the allegations have in particular related to the likes of sexual assault and rape. But of course, the likes of Harvey Weinstein are, they're rightfully so, they have essentially had their careers ruined. But in a lot of the milder
yeah,
examples where the celebrities have just kind of made a foot in mouth comment about something that it didn't really mean, it hasn't had long term repercussions. So yeah, that's an interesting angle as well.
I also think what some, for example, politicians, what they post online, and then they will say something, or even on TV, and but then it's just a
Hmm.
lie.
And that's the thing. I think,
Yeah, it's like you're never
yeah,
gonna do
and
it.
politicians in particular, they in a way, unlike other celebrities, they are meant to be role models. They should, in theory, the leader of your country, you would hope, would be a positive role model and a good citizen. So I think there's a distinguishing thing that can be made there as well. That with celebrities, their purpose is to entertain you. Their purpose isn't to set a good example of what a good citizen should be, and to run the country. Whereas
Yeah,
that is what politicians are meant to do. So politicians, in a way, should be even more careful because they are under much more scrutiny.
yeah. And for an example, there was Toby Young, who's a Conservative Party member, and he resigned before they had the chance to dismiss him over controversial tweets. I don't know what was said, but then by him resigning, he did
Hmm.
admit to his
I feel
faults,
that,
and it probably
yeah,
made life a
and
bit
that's the
easier for
right thing,
him.
that they should be expected to resign, because them not being offensive horrible people, it should come with the job, if that makes sense. You shouldn't be a
Yeah.
politician
Yeah.
if you are a fundamentally bad person. I'm sure in the past there have been many politicians that have been fundamentally bad people, but putting that to one side, what I mean is that with celebrities, there's no excuse, of course, for saying incredibly rude, offensive things, but their purpose is to make music or to act or to produce or
Yeah.
something like that. So
If they say something bad, it just
mhm.
ruins their career.
that
Um,
the general population, and especially people on Twitter, should be, in a sense, vigilantes and should report people and call people out on cancel culture and even demand people's resignation and demand that people have their careers and lives ruined, because some people might argue that that's the job of the judicial system and that we have no place doing that.
I don't think that people like the media or that should go around telling people you should resign.
Mm-hmm.
Why haven't you done this? I shouldn't. I don't. If somebody wants to post something offensive, I would encourage the platform
Mm-hmm.
to take it down. But I wouldn't. I won't like have. I
Mm-hmm.
won't object to people sending in comments saying why are you doing this, and almost like it making their life hell, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what comes with the
Yeah,
job. Like
yeah,
you can't expect not
100%.
to
I
have
think
that.
that
But I wouldn't say you have to say that I wouldn't have people go, you need to be
mm-hmm.
fired, you need to have this, you need to do that, because at the end of the day it's their choice. And especially with celebrities, it's your livelihood. It's up to you what you want to post, and you know full well that you're in the
Mm,
public eye. You've seen it happen, and you know more about these things than the
mm.
media does in some respect through colleagues and friends. And
Yeah, 100%. I think it's that celebrities
yeah,
have to realize that they have a responsibility to take responsibility for the things that they post online, because, like you said, it's happened so many times before. You can't necessarily say it's not fair that I've been cancelled because of something that I wrote 5 years ago. That's just the way the world is now. It almost doesn't really matter whether you think it's right or wrong, because there are always going to be people out there who that, just in the same way that there's always going to be Twitter trolls. It doesn't matter how much you try and get rid of them, they're always going to be there. There's always going to be
yeah,
people who will look for and scrutinize and criticize bad behavior on the part of celebrities, and they have to be prepared for that, I think.
yeah. So in conclusion, should people get fired for what they post on social media?
Yes, I think employers should have the power to, but I think what we can conclude is that everything has to be done on a case by case basis, because
I think everything has to be
yeah,
done
yeah, exactly. And there are so
professionally.
many different
You can't just
examples as
sack
well.
someone, oh,
But
when you posted
equally,
something.
even though you shouldn't just listen to social media in a blanket way and just take that as the view of the people, social media does have value because it gives people who might not feel that they have a voice, and might feel that they're a disadvantaged group, it gives them a voice to express the issues that are important to them. So even though cancel culture can be a bit
Yeah,
of a mob mentality, on the other hand, it gets disenfranchised, disadvantaged groups a space to stand up and say, you must please protect our rights, please stand up for us, because what is going on and our oppression through offensive comments is not right. And I think that that can be very valuable.
yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that every company should have the right to remain their
Mm-hmm.
reputation or
Mm-hmm.
protect it. And if somebody, but I think it depends on more if you're in a higher position or a more in a higher status, or depending on almost
Yeah.
what your job is. And I think you have to really
Mm-hmm.
interpretate things, because I don't know if that girl should have been sacked for something that she said, conquering the world one fat lady at a time. I'm not saying it's right
Mm-hmm.
what she said, but if it's in,
Mm-hmm.
it is again of where's it goes. But then compared to the university lecturer of the anti-Semitic post, a university lecturer that is
Mm-hmm.
completely wrong. And I think it completely varies on the situation, on the job, on the status,
on the severity of the comment as well.
Yeah. As we know, society, we are run by social media, which is a shame. It's a shame, but at the end of the day, they do have the Employment Rights Act of 1996, which protects employers from the negative comments.
You've got to listen to the law.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, that's the law. But then if you don't, every employer has the right to protect themselves, which is what you expect, just how we have consumer rights. So, I mean, there's stuff to protect everyone, and maybe there need to be more law and more insensitive around social media. And maybe it's more down to the platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. It's changing all the time. So I feel like this is a developing discussion and a developing situation. And I would love to, I think we should have this same podcast conversation in a year's time or 2 years' time or 5 years' time. Yeah, exactly. And see how it's changed and see what the situation is like, because it's certainly not something that's going to go away. And it really does divide people in the discussion.
Yeah. I think that brings to the end of our
I've
show.
really enjoyed talking about this. I think there's so much to talk about, so many different ways, and I think as well, I'm not saying that I have the answers or we have the answers. It's just something to discuss, and I know I'm gonna go away and keep thinking about this, I think.
There we go. So we'll arrange it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you,
Lucy.